America's war on terror. Remember that? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. You probably don't remember much about the war on terror because under this current administration, we really don't go to war too much. We kind of make mistakes, we bungle, we withdraw without game plans. But as for actual wars against terrorists, you haven't heard much on that. There's a reason for it. Before I get into that, I want to give a quick heads up that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can subscribe to Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com. Just go to the bottom of the page and find the newsletter section, find my name, click on it, sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter delivered right to your email box. All my commentaries I write all week long at the Washington Times to help you fight those far leftist loons in America right now. But also in my newsletter, twice a week, my Bold and Blunt podcast. Tuesdays and Thursdays it comes out. Check it out. But you can go to edify.app as well and subscribe to Bold and Blunt there. That is the online platform to go to if you are looking for faith-based podcasts. Edify.app. Check it out. Bold and Blunt is now part of its regular lineup. One more quick mention before we get into today's podcast discussion. Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. My latest book, now on sale. Check it out. Get your own copy. Get informed on all the behind-scenes discussions and agendas that the left used to exploit the coronavirus to justify crackdowns on individual liberties and, more than that, what they have planned for the future. The war on terror. The war on terror. That sounds so yesterday, doesn't it? This from History.com. As much of the nation was just starting the day on the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 East Coast flights, crashing 3 of the airplanes into targets in New York and Washington, D.C., with the 4th plane slamming into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back. That was sort of the signature media issue of the day. Everybody who was old enough to have a memory remembers where they were at that time, at that moment in September 11th history, what they were thinking, where they first saw the images, and more importantly, how they felt. It's sort of the shooting of JFK. Everybody who was alive then remembers where they were when they got that news. Well, when the airplane started crashing into America's buildings, everybody alive in America over the age of, say, 5 or 6 remembers where they were and what they were thinking. Back to History.com. In the end, 2,977 people died, making it the deadliest attack on U.S. soil in history. The Al-Qaeda-led attacks prompted President George W. Bush to declare a global war on terror military campaign, in which he called on world leaders to join the U.S. in its response. He said, and this is a quote, "Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists." It was a good speech. It was a very strong speech. It was what America needed to hear at the time. You know, I'm not a huge fan of George W. Bush, but I have to say, when I think back in time, he did give a couple of good speeches during that chaos and horrible time that drew Americans together in prayer. You remember his speech when he grabbed the bullhorn at Ground Zero as he was standing among all the rescue workers? Listen to this clip. This was from Ground Zero. George W. Bush's remarks to the world.
I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
USA, USA. I think back to the terror attack on America, and even Nancy Pelosi was standing outside the U.S. Capitol talking in favorable terms about America, standing hand in hand with Republicans and pretending, acting, I don't know. Perhaps it was genuine, but acting as if she truly cared about the fate of the nation. And look how far it's come now. The partisanship in America is crazy. But shortly after the terror attack, just a day later, Bush came out and said the United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy. We will rally the world. We will be patient, we'll be focused, and we will be steadfast in our determination. This battle will take time and resolve, but make no mistake about it, we will win. And then a few days later, on September 20th, in a speech to Congress that was also televised to the nation, that's when Bush announced the war on terror. His comments then were this: our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. So that was the beginning. That was the roots of the war on terror. October 2001, that's when the war in Afghanistan actually began. The ground war began. Special forces started striking. And then other countries sent troops also to Afghanistan, Turkey, Italy, other countries. And look, fast forward a few years, fast forward a couple decades, and you've got America's withdrawal from Afghanistan under Joe Biden, and we all know how that went. Disaster. If you had to sum it up in one word, disaster. And that's not even the partisan way of describing it. Look, Democrats think it's a disaster too. They just don't talk as loudly about it in those terms because they're worried about their own political careers. But Economist, the magazine Economist, came out a few months ago and penned this piece based on polling. 20 years after 9/11, September 11th, Americans give Joe Biden poor marks on terrorism. Most surveyed, though, think the so-called war on terror has been worth the cost. So look at this. The article goes on to describe attitudes toward terrorism and the president's records in terms of support from the American people in their response to terrorism. According to YouGov/The Economist, a survey conducted a few months ago, Americans think the group or country that poses the most serious or somewhat serious threat to the United States is ISIS, the Islamic State. About 70%, just under 70% of America thinks that. And then maybe about 65% say the Taliban. Just over 60% think China. About 58% say Russia. Maybe 56% or so say Iran. And about 50% say North Korea. So that was in mid-2021, actually late 2021, September. And the other part of this survey that I wanted to point out, they polled Americans which president's policies made the United States more or less safe from terrorism? They polled on George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. Not really surprising, the results. About 28% said George W. Bush, his policies, made the nation safer. About 21% think he made the nation less safe when it came to fighting terrorists. The rest thought he provided really no change from the previous administration. Barack Obama, only 20% think he made the nation safer in the war on terrorism. Joe Biden and Donald Trump, it's like salt and pepper, night and day. About 38% think Donald Trump made America safer in terms of battling terrorism. Versus Joe Biden, maybe 17% think he made the country safer. And that's being generous. That has to be being generous. I mean, I don't even think Joe Biden's own team members inside the White House think that he does a decent job of fighting terrorism. I don't even think his own team members think that he does a good job about pretending to do a good job about fighting terrorism. I mean, he can't deliver speeches. He can't even sell his own administration. He can't even do a proper PR job to convince Americans that he is a strong leader on national defense. So it's interesting to me that when you consider how long the war on terror has been waged, the more than 2 decades that America has been involved in actively fighting what was called in 2001 a war on terror, how little we really know about some of the discussions, some of the behind-scenes agendas and considerations that went into fighting the war on terror. I mean, really, when you consider all the years of activity fighting the war on terror and how little, comparatively speaking, actually made it into the media, into the press, for public consumption, it's interesting to wonder about what went on behind the scenes. How were certain determinations made? How was the global war on terror being waged behind scenes? Good question, right? So, coincidentally enough, I have a guest today who can address some of those very questions because he has written the book on it. He is Bill O'Reilly. He and Martin Dugard have written Killing the Killers, The Secret War Against Terrorists. It's the latest of Bill O'Reilly's highly successful killing series. And I'm happy to say Bill is here on Bold and Blunt to discuss some of his findings. Bill O'Reilly, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Cheryl, it's my pleasure to talk with you.
Killing the Killers, The Secret War Against Terrorists. It's already a New York Times bestseller. What can people get from this book that isn't already in the news?
Everything. I was lucky enough to convince a number of national security advisors, going all the way back to David Petraeus and Bush the Younger's administration, up until the end of the Trump administration, to basically talk to me on the record about what happened in their purview with the war on terror. The reason this is important is because they gave me a lot of national security stuff, a lot of classified stuff that nobody has heard or seen before. And essentially what we were interested in was how exactly the bin Laden raid went down, the al-Baghdadi situation where the special forces went and killed him, and Soleimani in Iran, and Boko Haram in Africa. So you've got these ongoing terror conflicts. None of them have been extinguished completely. The United States has done an excellent job in downgrading the overseas terror threat. But how? What techniques were used? Torture, coerced interrogation, assassination? We wanted to know everything. And the deal I made with these national security guys, and they were all men, was that I'm not going to quote you, and I'm not going to put anything in a book that would hurt America. But otherwise,
because I want to know what the deuce happened. And you were there, you saw it, you know it. And that's why the book, I think, is extraordinary. It's the best reporting I've ever done in my career, Cheryl.
No kidding.
I've been around a while, okay? And it did break number one on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yes, it did, almost immediately, as I understand it.
Yep.
So I don't want you to give away the book, because of course I want people to buy it, but can you give a taste of at least one of the reasons that they gave you that America was able to downgrade the threat?
Well, there were basically three reasons. Number one, during the Trump administration, the U.S. government spent $1.4 trillion upgrading the military. But nobody knows where that money went. Was it new uniforms, boots, what? A lot of it went to space surveillance and weaponry. Now, everybody knows the Trump Space Force, all of that. But President Trump, has been reticent to really tell the nation where this money went. We do. So the surveillance in space, I'll just give you one example. From 3 to 5 miles up into space, a U.S. drone can read the label of a golf ball sitting on a fairway in the United States.
Wow. That's amazing.
Nobody knows that. So we can pinpoint all over the world where terror activity is. We can see faces. We can see movements. We can do all that. Second is the weapons. The drones, the Hellfire missiles. When you read about what happened to Soleimani, and we track it the last 24 hours of his life, almost minute by minute, it's just amazing. And the headline that we have in the book is, after the Hellfire missile hit Soleimani and his Confederates, there were 8 of them, the only thing left was a finger with a ring on it. Soleimani's finger with a ring on it. The only thing left. The rest of these bodies were vapor. And we have that picture in Killing the Killers.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Did you talk to any of these players about the politics that go into fighting terrorism? And specifically, I'm thinking of the USS Cole and Bill Clinton's failure to respond to that. Did you talk about any of the politics?
Didn't get into the politics of it. Didn't go back that far to Clinton. But we did, and this I think will be very interesting to your listeners and readers, we did compare the campaigns, the anti-terror campaigns, from Bush to Obama to Trump, and we got into the Biden withdrawal from Afghanistan and how devastating that was, led to 18 servicemen being killed, U.S. servicemen. And so you will see, without me pointing it out in a very vivid way, the differences in the administrations and what they did vis-a-vis terrorism in the post-9/11 era.
It would seem to me, if I were a terrorist, that I would purposely just wait for the next Democrat to be elected as president. Is that far off base from what your research has found?
It's not precise. So Obama made a huge mistake by withdrawing all the U.S. troops from Iraq. You'll remember that.
Mm-hmm.
That led to ISIS just taking over half the country and a lot of Syria and killing tens of thousands of people. That action. Obama knew that. He realized that he wasn't in denial, as they say. And for the last 2 years of his 8-year administration, he became a much more dedicated culture warrior, much more aggressive, because he took it personally that this debacle had happened. Now, the press covered it up in a pretty big way. They didn't concentrate on that absolutely horrible foreign policy that Obama had of withdrawing all his troops from Iraq. Didn't have to do it. No pressure on him to do it. It was just another left-wing, insane thing. But Obama learned his lesson and began to install very aggressive campaigns against the terrorists. Then Trump took over, and Trump was by far the most aggressive president toward terrorism.
Absolutely.
And we methodically go through what he did, how he did it, and it was very effective. Biden has not changed the Trump people in the CIA and the NSA as far as I'm aware. that's a good sign for the country. So Biden didn't come in with a cleaver and take out all the pros who were so effective under Trump. But the Biden politics are ridiculous. And I say that with no ideology, or I'm not a party guy, you know that. It's absurd about his worldview and what he thinks the United States should do. It runs counter to protecting the American people, which of course is the top job of any president.
So what are some of the reverberations from Afghanistan that we perhaps don't know about? Because there must be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in terms of terrorists taking advantage of that situation, taking advantage of this White House right now that we, the people, aren't aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's very complicated. So ISIS hates the Taliban. The American people don't know that. All right, because it's a Sunni Shia thing. And so ISIS, when you hear about a bombing in Kabul or a bombing here and there in Afghanistan, that's all ISIS. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are friends. They're pals. And as soon as the Taliban took over, Al-Qaeda streamed into the northeastern part of Afghanistan and began training in camps again and reconstituting and all of that. So it's a complicated process. The Taliban itself is so weak, they can't do anything beyond the borders of Afghanistan. All they can do is keep the women inside. So, I mean, it's just, can't even feed their own people. It's a catastrophe. China's just waiting to take that country over. And that's what's going to happen to it. China's going to take it over. Not militarily, but the Taliban are going to become so dependent on China for everything that China will be de facto running Afghanistan in 3 years. Again, American people have no idea. So the important thing for us as far as terrorism is concerned is that, okay, you've got Al-Qaeda reconstituting there, you've got ISIS reconstituting in western Iraq and northern Syria to some extent. Why are they reconstituting? For one reason only, to kill infidels, and Americans are at the top of the infidel list. So this is now, the threat is starting to grow stronger, but we are better able to deal with that threat now than we were in the past.
I don't know if you went into these sorts of discussions with your sources, but would you say that intel in America right now regards terrorism as the greater threat, or China and Russia?
Well, the intelligence people don't make those decisions. I mean, they basically are assigned a certain sphere of the planet, and they're supposed to report back to the leadership, who then reports to Biden. That's the pipeline. So as far as I can see, and I think I'm the best expert in the world on this as far as a journalist is concerned, and he says humbly. But I know what I'm talking about. I think you know I know. China is a stalemate now, and China's in trouble internally. With COVID lockdowns, their economy is receding. They can't invade Taiwan because of what's happened with Putin. Xi is on the rocks. So I don't think that they feel that China is an imminent threat. Putin is actually losing in Ukraine. So his power is 50% of what it was 4 months ago, if you can believe it. I mean, he is really in trouble, Putin. On the other fronts, Iran continues to be the biggest threat in the Middle East to America by far, because they continue to export this unbelievable terrorism to the region, all over the place. Everybody's affected by that. Even though we took out Soleimani, the mullahs are still doing it, and they're effective in Iran. That's why people say, well, why is Biden trying to kiss their butt with a nuke deal when these people cause them so much trouble? And there's never an answer, because the White House press corps never asks the question. You know, a lot of the problem that America has with information flow, Cheryl, is that the corporate media is corrupt. And it's getting worse. So we, the people, dependent on information from the media, don't get it. And that's why a book like Killing the Killers is so important, because after reading the book, you're going to know, what the terrorist scorecard is.
So how concerned should we be under Joe Biden? I mean, that's an obvious question. Of course, we should be concerned with our war against terrorism, with the feckless Joe Biden in the White House. But honestly, what do your sources say in terms of concern with this administration?
Biden simply does not know what he's doing. And, that's a general statement, but from what I can get from people who are in contact with the White House, that's Klain, Rice, those people who are essentially running the day-to-day government, Biden's thought process on any given day doesn't exist. And I'm not saying that in a sarcastic way.
Oh, I know.
He's not capable on certain days of absorbing information. Now, to me, as an American citizen, that's pretty damn frightening.
Agreed. And I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I just wanted to, your whole series, your whole killing series, is it 17 books you have now in that series?
We have 11. Killing the Killers is the 11th killing book. I've had 18 #1 New York Times bestsellers.
Amazing.
Because we did right before we started the killing series, nonfiction contemporary books like Culture Warrior, A Bowl Fresh Piece of Humanity, that kind of stuff. I don't think there's been a human being in the nonfiction book area who's had 18 #1 bestsellers, Cheryl. I don't think so.
It's tremendous success, and
you'll never hear it.
I'm just curious. Out of all your killing series, out of just that series, which were your favorites? Which, if you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, they're all like kids. I can't do that. I mean, but I can tell you this: the hardest book to write was Killing Jesus. Because we did not take anything from theological sources like the gospel. We got it all from the scant history that was written about Jesus, but it exists. Josephus in Israel, Tiberius in Rome wrote about him,
right.
Which is amazing in itself when this guy was a stonecutter from a backwater town, and all of a sudden he shows up in Augustus Caesar's top historian's annals. But to ferret that out, what a bear that was. Well, we did it. And Killing Jesus, no religion. Want to know about the most famous man who's ever existed in history? You read that book. Killing Lincoln, the first one, the biggest seller. More than 3 million copies worldwide sold on that.
That was your biggest seller? Really?
Yeah, all my books are still in print. 19 million copies of my books in print.
I did not know that the Killing Lincoln was your best-selling.
Yeah, it's the biggest seller because it's been out the longest.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then all of the other books, I think, add to... If you read all 11 Killing books, you will have a tremendous knowledge of America.
And just quickly, last question: what one do you have planned for the future?
I can't tell you the title of it because when I do that, people steal the idea. I announced Killing Jesus too early, and all of a sudden there was a Killing Jesus out before me.
Gotcha.
You see?
Yeah, I get that.
But we're going to have another one this year because Killing the Killers was supposed to be out last November, but because of COVID, they couldn't print it. So then it had to be postponed till May 3rd of this year. We've been out for 12 days. We'll have another killing book at the end of September, but this book is totally different than all the others. I can tell you that, and it is a contemporized book.
Well, that's titillating. So I look forward to having you on the show to talk about that one as well when it comes out. But in the meanwhile, Killing the Killers, The Secret War Against Terrorists. Congratulations on yet another bestseller. And thank you so much for sharing your insights on Bold and Blunt.
Anytime, Cheryl. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, that's your latest Bold and Blunt. I want to thank you for listening. And if you'd like to subscribe, please go to edify.app. find Bold and Blunt there and download it, listen to it, subscribe to it. If not there, then at the Washington Times or anywhere podcasts are offered. Don't forget, you also should pick up a copy of my latest book, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Seems to me like you could get both Bill O'Reilly's Killing the Killers and Lockdown at the same time. One easy stop on Amazon or Books A Million, Barnes & Noble. But in the meanwhile, I want to thank you for listening to Bold and Blunt, supporting the Washington Times, subscribing to my newsletter, and of course, fighting for the freedom of America and American citizens. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.